So just the intro, my name is Annie. I am the treasurer of the Cactus Society for San Jose. Thank you today for coming to the talk. We're going to be talking about growing seeds with succulents, specifically Haworthias and a few other species. So let me share my screen. Ooh, just went away. Okay, can everyone see this? Great, thank you. Okay, so just a little bit about me and where I'm located so you guys can get a sense of the growing conditions that we have here. So I'm in what they call zones 10A and 10 and 9B. And this doesn't mean a lot to a lot of people sometimes, but basically it's the ideal condition for growing succulents. But I think when you're talking about zones, what's important to know is within even like a zone in your area, there's a lot of microclimates. And there's definitely a lot of microclimates in the area that I live. So we have, fog setting up in the morning that it's very cold and drops a lot of moisture onto the plants, all the way to really blazing hot sun in the afternoon. So even though you're within a zone, one thing I've learned is that really be very mindful what the microclimate is in your area. And ultimately, you kind of need to monitor your plants and see how they're growing and then move them if they're not happy. In terms of experience, I think very much like a 3-year-old seedling. I started in 2019, and I started because my, 12-year-old godson at the time, who got into plants as well, basically said, hey, why don't you hybridize? You have so many plants. And at the time I was like, oh, that sounds really hard and complicated, and I really don't have time. So he took upon himself to YouTube it and to see what it was like and say, hey, it's really easy and very simple. So I actually ended up listening to him and started hybridizing that year. But it was still the case that I didn't have a lot of time. So my approach to hybridization and growing in general is pretty simple. I really just rely on some basic knowledge, and I really don't have a lot of time, so it's minimal level of effort for me. So I don't really get fancy with using like heat maps or anything like that. And then sometimes I do resort to a little bit of prayer to the succulent gods to make sure that they all grow. In terms of the basics, what I like to think about in growing is what is the soil that they like? How much water do they want? What's the type of air that they like in terms of circulation, how much versus humidity? And then lastly, temperature. So I'll go through that in a bit and how it applies to Haworthia growing. And lastly, in terms of my yield, when I plant Echeverias, the yield rate has been around 10 to 20%, and then Haworthia is around the same range. And then Obesa is upwards of 80%. I know these numbers are very low, especially for Echeverias and Haworthias, but I have thousands of seeds. So you still end up with quite a number of plants. The Obesas really don't yield a lot of seeds, but they grow very easily. So I tend to have a really high success rate there. So that's really good. And if anybody's interested in growing seeds, I think Obesas are a really easy one to start with. Before I go on, please just ask questions. I like a very interactive type of presentation, so don't be shy. Okay. How do I go to the next? There. Okay, this is my greenhouse. I grow a lot of my seedlings in my greenhouse as well as inside my house. And the reason why is I can control the environment pretty well. My greenhouse pretty much has my seedlings and also Haworthias. And this spot right here that's sitting in has both north and south facing. So on this side of the greenhouse, it gets a lot of shade, but this one is really sunny. So even within my greenhouse, there's a lot of microclimates. And this is, you can see the front of it. And then on the bottom of these shelves where they get a little more protection from the sun, I do put my seedlings there. So let me show you what the greenhouse looks like. So each of this area on the shelf, you see you have like 3 or 4 shelves here. I do this because I want to maximize the real estate that I can have plants in. But I think a lot of growers like just one level, which is works way better. But I think with Hydworthias, because they don't need a lot of sun, or they love filtered sun, this works pretty well. Although I do have to shift them around at different times of the year because, you know, the strength of the sun varies. But this has worked well for me. And then on the bottom is where I put all the seedlings, and the level of light that they get is perfect for them there. So to give a sense of the greenhouse and where I might be growing them. Moving on, before we get into the plants themselves, there are some helpful tools that you might want. So the first one is cat whiskers. I don't think, you know, don't go chase a cat or a dog and yank whiskers off them. But if you are around one or have people that have pets, if they drop the whiskers, save them. I'll tell you how you can use them in a bit. But this is Abby, my cat Abby. So he supplies me with a good amount of whiskers. The next one is a water bottle spray. This is useful because when you're growing seedlings, they are very fragile. And so you don't want, you know, like a hose or just pouring water on them. Spraying and misting them is what they like. Collect some straws if you don't have any, preferably the clear ones. I'll show you why and how we'll be using them. And then seedling trays. I got these on Amazon. They come in a pack. It's pretty affordable and very easy to air them out and plant them, because at the bottom, it's a tray that allows you to really bottom soak if you need to. And then grow lights. I use grow lights for my seedlings, although you don't have to. If you find a space in your garden or a greenhouse that has filtered light, it will work well as well. Any questions so far? Okay. Let's talk about the basics for a little bit. So I think growing like life is all about striking the optimal balance amongst a few things here. The first one is soil. The key thing to think about with soil is how well it drains versus how much water it retains. And with seedlings, what I found is that they actually love to be more moist and dry for a smaller period of time. This is something I didn't realize in the beginning, and so I kind of didn't give them as much water. And once I realized they liked more water, I watered more often. The other thing with soil for seeds and seedlings is you want them to be finer grained because their roots are thin and fragile. So you don't want to have them fight big pebbles. And lastly, there are so many kinds of soil. I'll show you what my go-to soil mix is and what others have used that they found successful. But it's really fun to experiment with different types of soils. The other is water, like I mentioned. They do like water. When you water them, make sure you are gentle, because if not, you can dislodge the roots and loosen them, and they don't really like that. And also I think with Hydworthias, I tend to water every 7 to 10 days, allow the plant to dry in between. With seedlings, I found that probably you in the beginning, you want to keep them moist consistently. And then as they grow, like 3-4 weeks, you can reduce the watering cycle. But I think ultimately you kind of just want to watch them, see how they respond and how plump they get or how dry they get, and then just adjust accordingly. The other one is circulation. This one I think is the hardest to control sometimes. When I first plant them, I have them covered so that I can retain the moisture and create a level of humidity there. But you do have to watch out how it can grow mold or fungus. And so if that's the case, you can use hydrogen peroxide and it won't harm the plants. But it is a balance between giving them enough humidity, but as well as not letting the stuff you don't want to grow. So again, you just need to be vigilant and check in on them every couple of days. The last one is temperature. The reason I grow inside is because I don't want the temperatures to drop below 55. And I think they're happiest around this range, 55 to 70 degrees. But I think in some parts of, depending on the microclimate, I think they could go down to 50. And my greenhouse sometimes goes down to that much. And then when I started growing, I had grow lights on like over like 10, 12 hours, and they got up to 75 degrees. So I think there's some give and take there, but 55, 70 is probably the range they're happiest. Okay. Okay, so let's talk about soil. The soil that I use, I've experimented with a bunch, but the one I tend to like and go towards with seed growing and also seedlings is this combination. So the first one is pumice. This is smaller grain pumice. I think this is 1/8 inch. And I use 50% pumice. Okay. And then I use quite a high mix of potting soil. This is, I use 30% here. This is potting soil that I got from Home Depot. It's actually not Miracle-Gro or anything that, it's actually more premium soil that's very soft and high in nutrients. And then I mix it with a few other things. Coconut coir has good nutrition, and I like how light it is for the seeds. And then lava rock for drainage and some nutrition as well. And I sprinkle some worm castings on top just for equal measure. However, other growers do use other types of soil. So some of the ones here is Akadama, perlite, and turfus. Akadama is both turfus and Akadama is more clay-like, and perlite, I think you guys have experience with, is very light. So if you use it, you need to wet it so it doesn't float all over the place. But the first one is so 30, like a third perlite, turfus, and soil. This one is used by a grower that I know in Vegas. If you guys have not, he sells a lot on the Warthia Facebook site, but he has a lot of success growing his seedlings, and he uses this mix. The second mix is using Akadama. So Akadama is actually harder to get. It is very expensive. I think this bag could be like $35. But Rennie uses this, and as you guys, if you know her plants, they grow very well. And what she does is she mixes Akadama with hers. She doesn't, but if she were to recommend seedling combinations, she recommends about 50% Akadama with 30% pumice, and then some organic material. And you can vary the soil mix really based on your conditions. So if it's a drier climate, you want to increase the soil mix just to retain a little bit more water. This last one is mixing pumice, turfus, and lava rock. And this is a grower in the East Bay that has a lot of success and swears by this mix as well. So basically, you know, there are so many different ways that you can mix soil to match the climate you're in. So you really, even though you have all these recommendations, ultimately it's about finding the balance that works for you and how much you like to water or don't water and what your climate is. So I would say follow one of these if you'd like, but ultimately it's really fun to experiment with your own and see which works well. Okay, so now for the seeds. So in order to hybridize and get seeds, you need some flowering Hawarthias, and they're flowering right now, so they start in the winter. And you need at least 2 different types of Orthias. They don't pollinate themselves. And then the other thing is to know a little bit about the anatomy of the flowers. So here, this is the pistil right here, and this is the ovary. And the goal is to really gently place the pollen from one plant to the pistil of another. Okay, so I've had experience where I like knock this off, and once you do it, it's not going to work. So be very gentle when you do this. Okay, so there are different ways to cross-pollinate. The first one is the easiest, and that is leaving it to the pros, like the bees and the hummingbirds, and the various insects and ants that like to come visit our plants. The second one is you can use a tiny little brush to move the pollen from one plant to the other. I've tried this before. The key thing here is to find a brush that's actually thin enough, and it's really hard to do that because it's the flower is so small that it's really hard to find for Haworthias a brush that's thin enough. So even though I've used it, I gave up pretty soon. Another really popular way is using tweezers. So this one, I would say, is really time consuming. I did this in my first year and I almost quit. But what you do here is you have to move the petals and then remove the pollen sticks and then transfer it to the other flower. And then soon you have lots of different pollens, sticks all over the place, and you can't get them straight and you have to clean up. So, but the advantage of doing this though is I think the success rate is higher because you're literally manually moving the pollen from one to the other plant very surgically, but it's very time consuming. The fourth way is using human hair. The advantage is that it is thin enough so you can get into the flower, but it's actually not that stiff. So it kind of wiggles around a lot. But this is actually a very popular way to do it. And also you have an endless supply of hair. So it's easy access, and it fits the flower. Rennie actually uses this method pretty successfully. But my favorite way is using cat whiskers. And the reason why is because the diameter of the whisker is perfect, and also it has some rigidity, so it doesn't, you have a lot more control over it. So what I do is anytime I see a cat whisker around my house, I collect it and then I tape it to a stick. It can be anything. It can be a skewer, or just a stick that allows you to have a handle on it and actually use it to cross-pollinate. Okay, so here's how you do it. So you can see that the yellow bits here, that's the pollen. And this is how you want to do that. Okay, so basically I stick the cat whisker and swirl it around to capture the pollen. And I check the stick to make sure that has pollen on it, and then I move to the next flower. Okay, so here I picked two Coptonians, and I liked the color. I like the stripes in both, and I wanted to see if I can mix it. And also I like the pink in the second one. I think in terms of pollination, some people will tell you that noon to late afternoon is the best time to cross-pollinate. For me, I just do it whenever I have time. And if you cross-pollinate them 2 days in a row, multiple times, it tends to increase your success rate. So if you have time, do that. But let me show you how this would work. So plant one, going to the other plant. Any questions? Okay. So the plant selection with hybridization can be a lot of fun. There are different ways that you can mix them up. Here I show just some examples of pairing. And one thing I've learned is that if you pair, let's say, like this plant here, that they're similar in terms of like shape, size. And I found that if I go too far away from this plant, let's say, to like even this one here onto the right, the success rate is lower. So you kind of want plants are a little similar in terms of makeup of the shape and the size of it. I just had more success with it. If you can try having it a little bit more diverse, but just know that you may not get seed pods. So on this one, I really liked the color on the right and the lines on the left. So I wanted to see what I could make from these guys. And then on the kind of bottom row, middle one, that's a little bit more different. I felt like this one was a little more risky, trying to pair this big guy with the smaller one. But sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't. You just kind of have to experiment it. So this is about pairing, just picking two and two of the characters that you like to propagate and hopefully create like a mixture of different colors or new lines. But there are also other ways you can do it. In this example, I chose 3 plants to see what I could get from 3. And then yet another way is you can do just, many, just like a hummingbird going from flower to flower, just a lot more random, maybe a lot more interesting, and mixing way more than just 2 or 3 types of plants. So after a few weeks, you know that you're successful if you see these ovaries fatten to look like this. And then over time, about another couple of weeks, what they do is they dry up and then they open. And when they open is when you know the seeds are ready. Okay. Now, the biggest challenge with Haworthias is that, if you don't watch them, the seeds pods open, but then the seeds fall every which way and you lose them. So one way to prevent that is to use the straws and cut them into, the size of the seed pods and then cap them. People have used tape as well, but I did try that in the beginning when I didn't know about this method, and it's hard to take off sometimes. And this one is just easier. It fits perfectly around the pod and you can protect your seeds. Now, if you have a lot, it's a lot of work to cut all these straws and cap every seed. So you just have to be vigilant and check on them and then really pull them off before they fully open so that you don't lose the seeds. So this is what the seeds look like. This is the middle pictures when it's dried up a little bit, but they are kind of geometric in shape. And if you look at this seed pod, there's actually, within the seed pod, there could be divisions. And when you harvest them, make sure that you get all the seeds, like open every single petal, because sometimes the seeds hide and get stuck in between these membranes. And so make sure you capture all of them. And then when you take them out and harvest them, you can't really plant them right away. You have to let them dry for a couple of days. I actually don't plant my seeds until a couple of months after. but you want to make sure that they dry up before you plant them. Some other things that people do that I don't do is sterilize their seeds. So some people put it in the refrigerator, some people put it in the microwave. It's just too fancy for me. I don't have time for that. So I just harvest them. I put them in actually pill boxes I can show you later and wait for them to dry up. And then when I'm ready and I know I'll be around to watch them, then I start planting them. But they look like this. And these are a little bit bigger, but the smaller plants, their seeds are smaller. So it does vary by the size of the plants, the shape and size of the seeds. Okay, so this is different medium that I've used. On the left, I did use the perlite mix, and it worked well. The plants really liked them, but it was quite messy. So I have not opted for that again. The one on the right, I used turfus and soil and lava rocks, and the seedlings were pretty happy about that. So I think they're with the soil mixture. I don't think they're that picky as long as they have drainage and it's not pure soil. So I don't think you can go wrong with as long as you do like a 50-50 mix of like at least lava rock or agadama or non-organic material. In terms of watering, they like more moist soil. And if you find that on the top, the soil dries up, it is really good to mist them. One of the growers that I talked to, he misted them every day after the first week. And then he takes the cover off. I actually leave the cover on for a couple of weeks, depending on how the succulents are doing and how much more, fungus there is on top. But I think the main thing with growing these seedlings is that you want to make sure they are moist and they do not dry up. I've definitely had been like away and not vigilant at times and didn't water them, and I did lose them because they didn't have enough water. And then air, just make sure you ventilate them. If you start seeing some green bits here, like you see here, take off the top and let them air out. Okay. And then again, temperature, not too cold and not too hot. When I had them like going around 80 degrees, they did not like it. So 55 to about 70, 75 degrees is where you want to aim in terms of temperature. Okay, another thing to note, they grow very, very, very slowly. Okay, so these are, I think, a few months old. And of course, if the growing conditions are optimal, they grow faster. But these guys, for me, were very slow. In the beginning, I didn't know if that was a weed or a plant. So this one was growing in that ideal soil mix, the first soil mix that I showed you guys. So they were quite happy. I planted about over 1,000 seeds in about 5 trays, and I probably got like a few hundred of them. Okay, this is when they're about 3 to 4 months old. They're just beginning to show their patterns and their markings. I had small little gravel on top of this just to help them grow a little bit more and steady them, because I didn't have it before and they were a little wobbly. So if you see them growing and not having enough stability, I would put some small pebbles like 1/8 inch or smaller on top to help them. These are more, the ones back here are a little older. They're probably about 6 months old. And then when they're about above 6 months, and this is about 2-3 years, they begin to show their markings, which is probably the most fun, is to see them start to show their characteristics here. So this is a pink one, purple. This is a very chubby obtusa. I think this is a mix between an Emalea and Picta. And this is like a Captonia. This is a Jen Smith hybrid as well. Okay, before I move on to other types of succulents, any questions on the Haworthia? Section of the presentation.
I'm curious what that is you have that's on top of the shelf, but below the plants. It almost looked like a type of bubble wrap or something.
Which one is it?
Oh dear. It's just in your greenhouse.
In here?
I can't see it.
Oh, sorry.
It was quite a ways back.
1 second. Let me share again.
But I was just wondering, do you do that so that when you water, it doesn't drip down to the next shelf?
Which one? Here?
Yeah, I didn't see it in that one. Where's your next one?
That's the tools.
Okay. Let me see if I can find it. I took it.
This?
No, I'm sorry. I don't want to take up your time. I shouldn't bother. I was just curious what it was. It was kind of clear.
This? This stuff?
There, yes, that.
Okay. This was the lining of the shelf in my greenhouse that I since have removed because, yeah, this didn't let the water flow through, and now.
Okay, so it didn't work out. Okay, I was just curious if you used that so that they wouldn't drain on the next shelf down.
I did initially do it for that reason, but I realized that it was also pooling the water, and when the plastic is wet and it retains the moisture, it doesn't dry as fast, and therefore it could get a little yucky.
And it probably inhibits your air circulation also.
Yeah, exactly. And in my greenhouse in the summer, I do have like probably 4 fans going. In the winters, that's important to have that.
That's a lot of fans for a little greenhouse.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks little to me. Like,
it is. It's 6 by 8. It's a 6 by 8 greenhouse, and it's it's very small. I got it at Harbor Freight. My husband.
Oh yes, we consider that one. Yes.
Yeah, and it was like $250. Very affordable. You do have to build it and build a foundation for it, but it's a great greenhouse.
And I'm going to ask one other question, then I'll let you move on. You were talking about the growers. There was a grower that uses mixed seed. That's I'm just curious who these people are.
Yeah. So this one, the perlite turfus and soil, is Adam Reddick.
Okay.
I don't know if you've seen him on Facebook. He grows a lot of plants, and he's always selling his seedlings. So. He's amazing. So this has worked well for him. He's in a very dry climate though. He's in Vegas.
Oh, that's right. He was.
Yeah. So that's why he uses more perlite and soil.
Then Mexi was somebody nearby.
Yeah, this one is Rennie's recommendation. So if you don't know who Rennie is, Rennie sells like amazing plants, like I would call them designer Haworthias.
Okay.
And she uses 100% Akadama in her own plants, and because she imports Akadama, she can. But in terms of the soil that she would recommend, if you didn't have access to Akadama like she does, 30% pumice really works well.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and the last one is a lady in East Bay. Her name's Rebecca, and she introduced me to turfus. I had no idea what it was, but they apparently use it in like baseball diamonds to keep things dry. But it's very cheap. it's a good substitute for akadama, which is very expensive and hard to get. But but when you use turfus, you have to be very careful because the dust from it can be bad to breathe.
Okay.
So just be careful if you do that. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Were there other questions? I don't know if somebody monitoring chat. Okay. Okay. There are no more questions on Haworthia. Let's move on to Echeverrias. Okay, so for these species, I'm a lot less methodical. For these, I really leave it to the pros to cross-pollinate. I don't even try. I don't even try it. So these guys love hanging out in our area, and they're always, you know, drinking the nectar and stuff from the flowers, and so they do their job for me. So with Echeverias, this is the dried flower. So if the flower is not dried, then you can't really use the seeds. But I literally just crush them with my fingers and try to extract the seeds. And the seeds are the tiny, tiny, tiny bits here, not the big ones. And I don't, with the different flowers, I just clip them off once it's dry and put them on a bin. I don't label them. I don't do anything like that. And then once I have enough, I just sprinkle it all over a Tupperware that has whatever mix I want. It kind of doesn't matter because they grow so easily. A lot of times it's just pure soil, and then sometimes I add in some pumice. But I literally just sprinkle these seed pods all over the tray and then let them do its thing. I do cover them because they love moisture. And I found that when I didn't, it didn't grow as well. So I just have a container, a Tupperware container that has the soil, sprinkle all over the place, and then leave them and then check in on them, I don't know, once a week. So in the beginning, when I had these, in this picture, when they were like 1 to 2 weeks, I had no idea if they were weed or if they were Echeverias, had no clue. And then over time, it became a little more evident that, hey, these are actually Echeverias. So you can see that in about 3 to 4 weeks time, you can identify them more. But still, even at this stage, I didn't know if they were, you know, Echeveria or just another type of weed. And then once they become about 6 to 8 weeks, you can see their shape a lot more. So here I have a mixture of, most of these are agaboides. But these guys are very easy to grow. But there must be like thousands of seeds in here, tiny, tiny, and then you just get a full tray. So I didn't even sprinkle soil on top. And then once they grow bigger, this is what they look like. These are Echeveria elegans that I grew. And on top of this is turfus. And then this is the agaboides. So once they get this big, they grow pretty fast into this. Like it was within a few months that they went from kind of tiny, tiny to kind of big plants, which was very nice to see. Because the beginning, I felt like it took them forever to grow. Okay, let's move on to bases. So with the bases, you need a male and a female to actually make the seeds. Okay, and luckily I had males and female in my collection. And so one day I realized that they were like these puffy things. I was like, oh, what is that? I realized that then, oh, they must be seeds. So the hummingbirds were cross-pollinating, and because they were doing their thing, I got seeds. And so once these pods dry up, their seeds are like round little balls, and I couldn't find a picture, but they're tiny round black balls. And like the Haworthias, when they dry up, the seed pods will burst, and the seeds you'll lose the seeds if you're not careful. So you gotta watch out for it. And once it starts kind of in this phase, you want to put a netting over it. Okay, like I don't know, tea bag or something to catch the seeds, or else they will fall off. And so I've had times when I had to like dig through the top dressing here into the soil to fish out the seeds. And they're black, perfectly round ones, so it's really easy to identify. And then when you harvest them, it is a little sticky, so make sure that you dry them out a little bit before you plant them. But these guys grow really easily, and they look like this on the right. When I first saw these, I didn't know if like Obesis, they look nothing like Obesa, right? Like they're these tall little things with a round top, and eventually they round out and grow into a bigger ball. But I had no idea that these were Obesas. But this is what they look like at 1 to 2 months old. Oh, and each of these pods probably have like 3 seeds only, whereas Haworthias can have like 10, 15 seeds. And then once they start forming, so the one on the left, you can see that the middle part is turning more into a ball, so it's much more recognizable as an Obesa. But for a long time, like you have like no idea what's happening. And then when they're around 6 to 8 months old, you can see they're like a little tiny baseball. And then this little guy right here, you can see he's just like late to the game. And sometimes it takes them a while to sprout, and then you're just surprised. But like he didn't like sprout until 4 months later. That's why he's much smaller. And then once they hit a year, they look like a kind of normal Obesa that you see in shows and various places where you can buy them. So very easy to grow. The last one is this Fralea cactus. Again, like this one is a self-pollinating one, unlike the Obesas where you need a male and a female. So one day, so I had this plant, this fuzzy thing like became big and then it just came off, which is this guy. And I had no idea that they were seeds when I took it off. So luckily I peeled the outside, and once I saw these guys, I realized, okay, they are actually our seeds. So then I planted them, and there are lots of them actually in here. There are, I think, like 30 seeds in here. And so they are 3 to 4 months old. These guys grow very slowly, like very, and then here they're like 1 to 2 years old. But they are easy to grow. And again, if you don't keep them moist enough, they will dry out. So just watch them if you grow these. But they're super cute. And yeah, the hummingbirds, they just gifted me these seeds. So, and this was the first time I've planted them. But since then, I've had many. Because they're self-pollinating, you really don't need to worry about a female or a male. Oops. Okay, my last slide. Just some random stuff. The pill boxes. So a neighbor of ours unloaded a lot of pill boxes, and I was like, instead of recycling them, what can I use? So I use them to actually house my seeds, and it's very convenient because they're small enough, and there's so many of them that you can just label each one and just store the seeds, and when you're ready, you can plant them. So if you have extra pill boxes around, you can use them for that. And then a recommendation, I don't know if you guys know what Daiso is, but it's a Japanese dollar store. and they have great gardening supplies. They have the best water spray bottles. A lot of the ones I get at other places leaks or they get stuck, but Daiso has some pretty ones, and they're very, they don't leak. They have the perfect spray. So I would recommend going there to get some water spray bottles. And they also have a lot of like different like ceramic things that you can use to plant, and also Tupperware for $1.50 each. So it's a great place to get gardening supplies and seedling supplies. That's it. Thank you.
That was great. Very helpful. Thank you. You've inspired me to get out there and get started.
Yes, I think everyone should be growing seeds because first of all, it's really fun and very rewarding. And when you grow seeds, you realize how precious a little plant is and how much work it takes.
Thank you, Annie. Annie?
You're welcome. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to put that toolbox photo on the Facebook page under the tools and tips. Can you send that to me?
Sure.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Were there other questions for Annie? Okay. I guess we're good to go then.
What are you going to do with all the Hyworthia that you get?
That's a good question, John. Enjoy them, give them away, hybridize some more, maybe sell them at your show, maybe.
There you go.
It's very hard for me to let go of my plants, as you know.
I know. I propagate stuff with the intention of giving them away, and then I fall in love and I can't give it away.
I know it's very hard. So no, it's nice to give them away to people who want to get into the hobby and propagate the love that way and the interest. Yeah, but it's very hard to give away. I mean, the tiny thing took you like 2 years, right, to nurture and grow. I'm wondering if there are other people in the audience who have hybridized and what tips they have.
I've hybridized some Haworthias, maybe not to the extent that you have, but I've done some. I think you're spot on that the more similar the plants look, the more likely you are to get good seeds out of them. I found that they hybridize really readily, but sometimes if they're too far apart in the genus, they don't like to produce seeds. And maybe a small point of clarification is if you do have two genetically distinct seedlings from the same species, those will cross. They don't need a different species.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. You know, so this is what my 3rd year. I started in 2019, and some of those plants are still very small. So here, the thing is, you really have to be patient. It takes so long to actually know what they'll eventually look like and whether you're successful in picking the traits from the 2 or 3 or 4 plants, you know. So it's definitely a long game.
I've noticed that you don't really see the first characteristics on your plant until like their 4th leaf, which kind of comes through around like the 4 or 5 month mark. And even then it doesn't look like the final plant. It's just when you first start to see, you know, speckles and spots.
Yeah, that's right. That's
I
right.
have a bit of, for people who don't have a cat around them, if you do have a broom with like a synthetic,
Right.
a synthetic brush, then those threads work really well.
Yeah, that's a good point. They tend to be a little rougher and harder. So if you do use that, depending on the bristle, if you do use that, just be a little careful, a little bit more careful than you would with human hair or with a cat or dog whisker.
Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I'm really impressed by your presentation, the pictures you have and the various steps that you presented. Excellent work. Is that your professional line of work?
Thanks, Marilyn. It is not, I know I'm not like a professional presenter, but I do love presentations at my work. And yeah, so at Apple, we use Keynote, which is what I use for this presentation. I think that's responsible for some of it. So
I was just
it's
about
really
to ask
Apple
you, is it
software.
Keynote or PowerPoint?
Well, John, really? You can't tell?
Well, you know, I could tell, but I was, as a joke, I was going to ask you that because I know you work at Apple.
Yeah, but she uses Excel instead of numbers, so you know.
Hey, no, it
I
is,
think that's
you know,
pretty common, actually.
it is very common, yeah. Yeah.
Numbers is great if you don't know how to use a spreadsheet.
Numbers is great for non-numerical work, non-quantitative work.
Non-numbers, yeah.
Yeah, non-numbers. But if you want to make a flyer, numbers is great. But I appreciate that, Marilyn. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
You are welcome.
Okay, so who's inspired to go and actually like plant the seeds? Because we're starting a seed bank, right? As Tyra mentioned. It's easy. Just give it a shot. If they don't grow, just try the next seeds. See, I see everyone.
I actually had tried some Haworthia seeds and they came up, and there's still a few of them there, but I think I need to transplant them into something else now. I didn't use the right soils.
Oh, what did you use?
I just made a little mix of bonsai jack and a little bit of shredded peat or something and sand. I just whatever I thought would help. I didn't research.
Yeah, I think the sand, be careful with the sand because it clumps and
Going too much, yeah.
yeah, and the little roots can't get through it.
Yeah, but I'll follow your advice and try it again.
Excellent. Any other questions?
I think you should teach everybody else how to do presentations. It's probably one of the best ones I've ever seen. I'm not kidding you. We've seen a lot of them the last couple of years.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Annie.
Thank you.
All right.